The crystalline light of the Xylar council chamber refracted across the polished obsidian floor, casting elongated shadows that danced and writhed with the flickering projections of the void. Tension, a palpable entity, hung heavy in the air, a suffocating blanket woven from the fear and uncertainty that had gripped the Xylar Imperium for cycles. High above, the ancient holographic star chart of the known galaxy pulsed with a malevolent light, each celestial body a potential target, a future acquisition, until a single, anomalous distortion blotted out the celestial tapestry. It was a blemish, a disruption in the flawless conquest, a dark omen in the celestial ballet of annihilation they had become accustomed to. Admiral Zalara, her bioluminescent skin a dull, anxious gray, addressed the council, her voice a low, resonant thrum that barely cut through the oppressive silence. The anomaly persists. Its origin remains unknown. Sensor readings are inconclusive. The object defies classification. The other counselors, their faces etched with a spectrum of expressions ranging from arrogant dismissal to utter terror, shifted uneasily in their seats. Each of them, masters of their respective domains of warfare, trade, and cultural domination, were accustomed to the swift, decisive nature of their campaigns. Worlds fell before them, civilizations crumbled, and their imperium expanded exponentially, a relentless tide of conquest. Yet this anomaly, this thing asterisk, had halted their advance, and for the first time in millennia the Xylar Imperium felt vulnerable. Grand Patriarch Zythar, the supreme leader of the Imperium, his imposing form radiating an almost palpable aura of ancient power, remained impassive, his multiple eyes slowly scanning each counselor, gauging their reactions. He had witnessed the rise and fall of countless empires, civilizations consumed by their own hubris. He had also orchestrated the downfall of countless rivals, carefully positioning himself as the apex predator of the galactic arena. But this was different. This wasn't a rival empire, a rebellious colony, or a pre-spacefaring species. This was something else entirely, something unknown. His multifaceted eyes finally focused on Zalara, his voice a gravelly whisper, "Elaborate, Admiral." Zalara swallowed, the bioluminescence on her skin dimming further. She gestured towards the holographic projection, her manipulator claws trembling slightly. Initial scans detected a vessel of a design utterly foreign to us. Its energy signature is baffling. It emanates a sort of calm amidst the chaos of our weapons systems. Furthermore, we are receiving signals, complex data streams of unknown origin. A collective murmur rippled through the chamber. Unknown signals were a frequent occurrence, emanated by long-dead civilizations, lost probes, or the lingering echoes of cosmic phenomena. But this was different. This was deliberate. This was communication. Zythar's voice cut through the murmur like a shard of ice. Decipher the signals. Deploy the interceptors. Assess the threat. His tone was devoid of emotion, but his mind raced with 1,000 possibilities, 1,000,000 calculations. The Xylar Interceptor fleet, sleek, predatory vessels of war, were dispatched to investigate. They were the spearhead of the Xylar war machine, designed for swift, brutal conquest. The vessels were armed with mass-driver cannons, energy lances, and a devastating array of kinetic and energy-based weaponry. They were designed to obliterate any resistance, and they had never failed. Yet, as the interceptors closed in on the anomaly, they found themselves facing an enigma. The object they had been dispatched to engage was a sleek metallic vessel, unlike anything the Xylar had ever encountered. It was elegant, graceful, and it radiated a curious lack of malice. There were no discernible weapons emplacements, no obvious signs of aggressive intent. Admiral Zalara watched the sensor readings on her command screen, her internal processors working furiously to make sense of the data. The intercepted signals continued to flow, a relentless torrent of complex data. A small team of Xylar linguists had been working tirelessly to attempt to understand the alien signals, but initial attempts had only resulted in gibberish. The aliens, the species that possessed this mysterious vessel, were an enigma. As the interceptors moved in for a closer inspection, the alien vessel did not react in the way the Xylar expected. It did not attempt to flee. It did not deploy weapons. Instead, it sent a new transmission, a single, seemingly simple message, translated into a form that the Xylar could, with difficulty, understand. Greetings. The audacity of it was astounding. An unfamiliar vessel of unknown origin in Xylar space, greeting them as if they were old friends. The council chamber erupted in a chorus of outrage, accusations of weakness, calls for immediate annihilation. Zalara, however, felt a strange sense of unease. She had studied the histories of countless species, observed their rise and fall, and she knew the nature of war. She understood its nuances, the ebb and flow of conflict. and she was increasingly certain that this confrontation would be unlike anything the Xyler had experienced before. Zythar silenced the council with a gesture, his multiple eyes fixed on the holographic display. He turned to Zalara, his gaze piercing. "Admiral, what do you recommend?" Zalara, taking a deep breath, knew that she was treading into dangerous political territory, but she also knew that the continued aggressive stance would lead to a war that the Xyler might not survive. "Grand Patriarch, I propose a less aggressive approach. I recommend a diplomatic engagement. We know so little about this vessel and its occupants. A war would be premature." The council exploded again, cries of treason echoing through the chamber. Zythar held up a hand, silencing the uproar. He studied Zalara, his gaze probing her mind, searching for signs of deceit. He could feel the pressure of the other counselors, the weight of their expectations. But he also sensed something in Zalara's words, a hint of respect, of genuine concern. He had to make a decision, a choice that could determine the fate of the Imperium. With a slow, deliberate nod, he spoke. "Very well, Admiral. Prepare a diplomatic envoy, establish communication. But be warned, Zalara, if they show any signs of aggression, I will not hesitate to unleash the full might of the Imperium." The diplomatic envoy was assembled. It was a perilous task, a risky proposition, but it was crucial. A delegation was formed, consisting of Zalara herself, a renowned linguist, and several high-ranking diplomats. They were to attempt to make contact with the alien vessel, to understand its intentions, and, if possible, to negotiate a peaceful resolution. As the envoy boarded the vessel, the atmosphere in the chamber was heavy with foreboding. No one knew what to expect. The envoy vessel, a slender, sleek craft, approached the alien vessel with a mixture of trepidation and anticipation. As the vessel came to a halt, the alien vessel opened a door. Not an airlock, not a hatch, but a door. And a ramp extended. The diplomatic team slowly disembarked, their hearts pounding in their chests. The atmosphere was serene. The Xyler had expected a hostile greeting, a barrage of weaponry, but they were met with silence. As they approached, a figure emerged from the alien vessel. It was a human. The human, a male, was tall, slender, and wore a simple, functional uniform. He had dark hair, warm brown eyes, and a calm, composed expression. He stood before them without any visible weapons and simply smiled. In perfect Xyler, he said, "Welcome, we are the humans. Please come in, we have been expecting you." The Xyler were stunned. This was not what they had expected. This was unexpected. Zalara, her internal processors working overtime, had to force herself to remain calm. She knew that they were now in a position of vulnerability. They had to act with caution. She gestured for her team to follow her. They slowly entered the alien vessel, their eyes darting around, searching for any signs of danger. The interior was unlike anything the Xyler had ever seen. The vessel was filled with natural light, soft colors, and intricate designs. There were no weapons, no visible security systems. It felt peaceful. The human led them to a circular chamber where a table was set with what appeared to be food and beverages. He gestured for them to sit. "Please be at ease," the human said, his voice calm and reassuring. "We have been observing your Imperium for some time. We know of your history, your ambitions, and your methods. We wish to discuss them." The linguist translated the words, and the counselors struggled to comprehend their situation. This was unlike any first contact scenario they had ever experienced. The human was aware of them, he knew of their history, and he was offering them hospitality. Zalara, with a flicker of respect, found herself intrigued by the human. She carefully sat down at the table. Over the next few days, the Xyler learned a great deal about humanity. They discovered that the human vessel was not a warship. It was a research vessel, a vessel of exploration. They learned that the humans were not conquerors. They were observers. The humans were interested in understanding, in learning, in experiencing the universe. And they possessed a technology far beyond anything the Xyler had conceived. As the days turned into weeks, the Xyler were introduced to the human philosophy, their ethics, and their culture. The Xyler were masters of war, but their civilization was built upon slavery and domination. The humans, on the other hand, had abolished slavery centuries ago, and their society was built upon principles of cooperation and mutual respect. The Xyler were arrogant and domineering. They saw themselves as the apex predators of the galaxy. The humans were humble and curious, always willing to learn. The Xyler had weapons that could obliterate entire planets. The humans had weapons that, while equally destructive, were almost never deployed. In one of their meetings, Zalara asked the human, whose name was Captain Evelyn Reed, Why do you not seek to conquer, to expand your territory, to dominate the galaxy?" Captain Reed smiled, her expression genuine. "We have observed many civilizations rise and fall. We have seen empires built on conquest, and we have seen them crumble into dust. We have learned that true strength is not found in domination, but in understanding. We seek knowledge, not power. We seek to protect, not destroy. The revelation struck the Xylar with the force of a supernova. They were accustomed to seeing their adversaries as inferior beings, their weaknesses easily exploited. The humans, however, were something entirely different. They were strong, and their strength came not from brute force but from something far more formidable, their ethics. As the Xylar and humans continued to engage, they learned more about each other. The humans were incredibly advanced technologically. They could manipulate space-time, harness the power of stars, and had developed energy shields that could withstand the full force of the Xylar's weapons. But remarkably, they used this technology for exploration, scientific endeavors, and the betterment of their species. The Xylar, on the other hand, were masters of warfare, and their history was a testament to the brutal efficiency of their conquest. During one of their meetings, Captain Reed revealed something that stunned the Xylar delegation. She unveiled a holographic display showing the location of several hidden space stations, each of which contained a vast array of advanced technology, including weapons systems that dwarfed those of the Xylar. "We have the means to destroy your Imperium," she stated, her voice devoid of emotion, "but we choose not to. We do not believe in the destruction of others or the taking of life unless it is absolutely necessary." The Xylar were shaken. They were prepared for war, but not this. They had prepared themselves to defend, but not this. They had never considered a civilization that had the power to conquer, but choose not to. They were confronted with a concept that shook the very foundations of their understanding of the universe. The diplomatic process was slow, fraught with the constant challenges of miscommunication and cultural misunderstandings. But eventually, a tentative agreement was reached. The humans would share their knowledge, and the Xylar would cease their aggressive expansion. The Xylar agreed to a limited arms reduction, and the two species began to exchange technologies and ideas. In the heart of the Imperium, even the most bellicose of the counselors began to accept the reality of humanity. They had conquered worlds without resistance, and now the humans were changing everything. The Grand Patriarch, who had been skeptical and cautious, began to show signs of respect for the humans, who had shown their willingness to trust. He authorized a series of cultural exchanges and scientific collaborations. The Xylar scientists and engineers were amazed by the human technology, their efficiency, and their ingenuity, and they were especially intrigued by the humans' ethical framework. The humans' morality was so alien, so utterly strange that it was, paradoxically, what ultimately attracted the Xylar. The day came when the Xylar and humans agreed to formalize their alliance. The council chamber was packed, the tension thick in the air. The Grand Patriarch, surrounded by the council, stood before Captain Reed and her delegation. The hollow projector crackled to life, displaying the image of the Xylar Imperium and the territory of humanity. The two species would stand together. The humans would help defend the Xylar against any external threat. The Xylar would work with the humans to solve any galactic problems. It was a historic moment, the dawn of a new era. As the formal agreement was ratified, the chamber erupted with cheers of joy, relief, and cautious optimism. As the agreement was signed, the holographic projection began to flicker. A new image materialized, a massive monolithic structure, unlike anything the Xylar or humans had ever seen. The structure was ancient, impossibly large, and its location, incredibly, was located at the edge of the galaxy, the farthest reaches of known space. The signal had been received by a human probe, deep in the intergalactic void. The holographic projection changed to show the interior of the structure, revealing a vast network of corridors, chambers, and control rooms. The structure was a megastructure, a structure of immense size and complexity. Even with the advanced technology of both species, the scale of this structure was staggering. No known civilization could have built it. The images then showed the Xylar and humans the final contents of the probe, a series of complex symbols. The signals seemed to be a message. The messages were received by an unknown entity and were recorded for posterity. Captain Reed turned to the Grand Patriarch. This is a signal, a message from a civilization that existed long before our own, a civilization that disappeared without a trace. The structure we are viewing is a relic of that civilization. It appears to have been abandoned for millennia. This message may be a call to arms, it may be a warning. The Grand Patriarch leaned forward, his multifaceted eyes gleaming with anticipation. "What do you suggest, Captain Reed?" The human captain took a deep breath. "We must investigate. This is not just a discovery, it is a challenge. It is an opportunity. This could be a new chapter in our shared history, or it could be a harbinger of doom. We must prepare. We must be ready for anything." And so the alliance between the Xylar and humanity was tested by the unknown. Their combined forces began to prepare for a journey into the uncharted territory of space. They understood that their previous conflicts were minor. They had been fighting for control, for power, for conquest. But this was something different. The message, if it was indeed a call to arms, may have been from a hostile civilization, or perhaps not. Either way, the message was something that neither the Xylar or the humans could ignore. As they approached the megastructure, the sensors began to pick up a strange phenomenon. The gravitational pull of the structure was unlike anything the Xylar and humans had ever measured. It was pulling everything towards it, warping space-time around it. As their vessels drew closer, the images on their screens became distorted. The sensor readings were fluctuating wildly. The tension in the bridge was palpable. The Xylar and human officers looked at each other, their faces etched with a mixture of fear and excitement. They had never encountered anything like it. As the first ships began to enter the structure, they saw the vastness of the interior. The corridors stretched for light years, the chambers were the size of planets, and the technology was beyond anything they had ever conceived. But there were signs of decay, evidence that the structure had been abandoned for a long time. The control panels were broken, the power systems were failing, and the environment was hostile. It was a perilous situation, and the risks were immeasurable. As the exploration teams delved deeper into the structure, they began to encounter strange anomalies. The scientists, working together, discovered that the signals weren't from the structure. They were coming from the heart of the galactic core. They realized that the message was a transmission, and the structure had been designed to send it. The more the Xylar and humans explored, the more they realized the implications of their discovery. It was not a call to arms, it was a warning. It was a message of defiance. The message had been sent long ago. It was a cry for help from a civilization on the brink of extinction. The megastructure was a weapon, and its target was the void. It was an intergalactic war, and the enemy was a force beyond comprehension. The megastructure's creators had detected a disturbance in the cosmic background radiation, a ripple in the fabric of spacetime. The disturbance was growing. The void was encroaching. The creators knew that the encroaching darkness would devour everything, and that it would devour them first. As the Xylar and human scientists attempted to understand the nature of the void, they began to decipher the message more clearly. The void was not just a destructive force. It was a consciousness, a being of pure negativity born of the absence of light and hope. The void was a threat to all life. The megastructure was created as a weapon to destroy the darkness, to keep the void at bay. The Xylar, accustomed to the brutal reality of galactic war, were not entirely surprised. However, the human scientists, with their adherence to principles of peace, were horrified. For the first time, the humans were in despair. They knew that the fight was not just against the void. It was against themselves. Their greatest strength, their ethics, their morality was their greatest weakness. They did not wish to destroy. As the teams went deeper into the heart of the megastructure, they came across a vast chamber, filled with the remnants of technology the human scientists did not understand, and the Xylar could only dream of. The chamber was filled with a strange energy, an energy that seemed to pulse with a dark, terrible purpose. Captain Reed, her face pale, spoke in the chamber. The message, it's a warning. The creators of this structure knew that the void would come. It had to be stopped. She looked up. We have to stop it. The Grand Patriarch nodded slowly, his multiple eyes filled with a new resolve. We will fight. We will stand together as one species and face this darkness. Zalara, her bioluminescence dim, spoke to the scientists who were working with her to understand the structure. It appears that the structure itself is the weapon. Its purpose is to fire a weapon of unimaginable destructive power into the void. The humans and Xylar knew the weapon was their only hope. However, there was a problem. The weapon could only be activated by the sacrifice of its creator's civilization. To fire the weapon, the megastructure would have to be destroyed. The Xylar and humans would have to give up everything. As they began to organize the preparations, they received an incoming message. It was a message from the void itself. Chilling, disembodied voice echoed through the comms. You cannot stop us. You are too late. The darkness is coming. A wave of dread washed over the Xylar and the humans. They had no idea where the message had come from. The Xylar had to make a decision. They could not turn away. With this, the Xylar Council and the humans who had accompanied them made a final decision. They would continue. The combined fleets of the Xylar and humans, a united force now, assembled in a vast armada around the megastructure. Their ships, a mix of sleek Xylar interceptors and human scientific vessels, were dwarfed by the scale of the structure, but their collective power was immense. They had to destroy the megastructure to activate the weapon and push back the void, but they understood the implications. If the weapon failed, the void would consume them all. As the fleets approached the heart of the structure, the void began to manifest. The area around the megastructure started to distort and collapse, a visual representation of a force that defied all laws of physics. The darkness began to appear, a swirling vortex of nothingness, hungry, vast, and utterly terrifying. The first void ships appeared, monstrous entities of pure energy and shadow, as alien and incomprehensible as the void itself. The battle began. The Xylar unleashed their most devastating weaponry, their kinetic and energy weapons ripping through the void ships. The human vessels, meanwhile, used their energy shields to protect their allies and the megastructure. The battle was a brutal, all-out conflict against an enemy they did not understand. Many ships were lost, but the combined fleets pushed forward. As the battle raged, the scientists worked tirelessly to activate the weapon, and it began to come to life. The megastructure, a vessel of unimaginable power, began to draw upon the energy of the void itself. The plan was to siphon energy from the encroaching darkness and use it against itself. The void ships pushed harder, the human and Xylar forces struggling to contain them. As the weapon was about to be unleashed, the weapon's core was becoming unstable. The void had begun to take hold of the very structure itself. There were losses on both sides. Captain Reed, standing on the bridge of her flagship, stared at the unfolding chaos. She could not accept defeat. She knew that there was only one thing left to do. She turned to her XO, a human officer, and spoke. "Prepare the self-destruct sequence." The XO, his face a mask of grief and determination, nodded. "Understood, Captain." Captain Reed, after consulting with the Xylar Admiral, made an announcement to the Allied fleets. "We must activate the self-destruct sequence to trigger the weapon. We can still succeed, but this will be our only chance." The news spread through the fleet. The Xylar understood. This was the ultimate sacrifice. They turned their ships towards the weapon, setting them on a course for their destruction. Their ships would become the Void's final meal. Admiral Xylara was on the bridge of her flagship. She watched the human vessel's final signal. The Xylar fleet, understanding their fate, formed a perimeter around the structure. The Xylar knew that they may not be able to return home, but they would die with honor. The message sent from the human vessel to the Xylar fleet was clear. The humans would fight alongside the Xylar, and together they would die. With one single blast, the weapon was unleashed. An explosion of white-hot energy erupted from the megastructure, the energy channeled directly into the heart of the Void. The Void ships were consumed. The structure, now consumed, began to collapse. The combined fleets were lost. The megastructure, the only weapon, collapsed. All communication was lost. The combined effort had bought the galaxy more time. The Void began to retreat, the darkness shrinking back from the galactic core. The universe was still threatened. The threat was not gone, but the Void had been weakened. The scientists on a Xylar research vessel detected a faint signal, a distress beacon. The message was from a human, a single human, alive. The human had survived. The survivor was Captain Reed. The human ship was heavily damaged. The humans would not be able to return home. With the fleet gone, they had nothing to return to. The ship limped through space, and the remaining humans, including Captain Reed, could only hope to survive. The remaining Xylar fleet, led by Xylara, arrived and rescued Captain Reed. After docking the ships, they sat together in the command room. They knew that the human was not a conqueror. They knew that she cared about their civilization. Even with her world gone, the human had only one thought. The Xylar had become their friends. The remaining humans and the Xylar set forth for a new frontier. They would rebuild their civilization. They would begin anew. They would start a new life, and they would remember the sacrifice of their allies. In the aftermath, the galaxy began to heal. The Void had been pushed back. The Xylar, their empire severely diminished, began the process of rebuilding. They mourned their lost comrades, the friends they had made, the bonds that had been forged in the face of unimaginable danger. They also began to look for the traces of the human civilization. The human civilization was gone. It had paid the ultimate price. They began the process of recording human history. The human story became a legend, a story of sacrifice, bravery, and friendship. The loss for the Xylar was immense, but the memory of the humans, of their selflessness, of their unwavering commitment to what they believed, served as a beacon of hope in the darkness. The Xylar had learned that there was more to life than conquest, more than power, more than the pursuit of dominance. They had witnessed the extraordinary potential of unity, the strength that could be found in compassion, and the enduring power of hope. The Xylar also learned that the humans were not the first to have fought against the Void. Deep within the megastructure, they found a record of another civilization that also fought to hold back the encroaching darkness. They were a civilization of scholars, artists, and philosophers who had understood the true nature of the Void and dedicated their lives to understand and defend against it. They too had fallen, but their legacy had lived on. Centuries later, the Xylar, rebuilt and renewed, expanded into the galaxy once more. They traveled alongside the humans, their allies, their family. They knew that the battle against the Void was not over, but they also knew that they were no longer alone. They had the humans, their allies. They had the courage of those who came before. They had found new allies and were always on the lookout for new planets. One day, on a distant planet, a young Xyler, filled with the knowledge of the past, looked up at the stars. She stared into the dark expanse of space and whispered a prayer. "We will never forget. We will always remember. The void will never prevail." And as she spoke, a single, faint signal was received. A message of unknown origin, but its tone was familiar. It spoke of hope, it spoke of unity, and it spoke of the endless possibilities of the universe. The signal seemed to promise a new dawn, a new beginning, a new hope.